Hello class, after a long delay, I am here back with your new next lecture. Today we are going to start the next unit, that is memory organization. Today will be the first lecture of the memory organization. If you remember, when we started off this subject, we talked about the basic block diagram of the computer. One side we had the input device, the other side we had the output unit, in between we had the CPU having the ALU, the memory unit and the control unit, and then we had the memory. In the previous unit also, we have discussed that although the communication seemingly takes place between the CPU and the input output device, the actual source and destination of the information is the memory unit. When we say that the data is going from the CPU to the output device, actually the data is originating in the memory unit. And when we say that the data is being read from the input unit into the CPU, the final destination of the data is actually the memory unit. So let's today talk about the memory organization. We will talk about something called the memory hierarchy. Memory hierarchy is a way of looking at the various types of memories in terms of their parameters. Before we actually look into the memory hierarchy, let's first understand what are the various parameters on the basis of which we can compare memories, right? We'll come back to memory hierarchy. Now, there are many characteristics. These are the characteristics on the basis of which you can compare memory devices. When you say that I have 2 or 3 or 4 memory devices connected to my computer, now you want to differentiate between them. Now, how do you differentiate between the various memory devices? Now, you use certain characteristics in order to differentiate between them. Now, the characteristics are location. They may be different on the terms of capacity. They may be different in terms of unit of transfer. They may be different in terms of access method, performance, physical type, physical characteristics, and organization. We'll talk about these characteristics one by one. In terms of location, we may have three types of memories. The first is the CPU. The location is the CPU. When we say that the location is the CPU, we are actually talking about the memory unit that is present within the CPU. Yes, I am talking about the CPU registers, right? They are the smallest, fastest memory devices, right? Although I started off with saying that we will talk about the memory, but CPU registers are also a type of memory. They come under the memory unit that is present within the CPU. So the first location is the CPU, where we talk about the registers. As I said, they are the fastest and the smallest memories. Then we come to the internal memories. The two basic memories, the RAM and the ROM, RAM standing for random access memory and ROM standing for read-only memory, they come under the category of internal memories, right? And the other memories which are present outside the CPU, or which are present, which you can connect to the CPU, they are said to be the external memories, right? Like your hard disk, your CD, your pen drive, your external hard disk, or any other memory that you attach to your computer, they are all called external memories. When we talk about the capacity of a memory, we specify the capacity of a memory with the help of two parameters. We specify it in terms of word size and the number of words. This, if you remember, we have already talked earlier also. The number of words is the number of data elements that can be stored in a memory device, and the word size is the basic unit or the basic size of a data element that is stored in the memory. Say for example, if I can have a memory which is storing, let us say, if I talk about a hard disk, I can have a memory that is storing, let us say, 1 terabyte of memory, 1 terabyte of storage, right? So if this is to be used with a byte addressable computer, then it means that the number of words will be 1 tera and the word size will be 1 byte. If it is a word addressable computer, where let us assume that the word is 32 bits, let us say, and I say that my memory capacity is 1 tera words, then it is one and the same thing. We say that the number of words is 1 tera and the size is one word, that is, let us say, 32 bits. But if I say I have a 1 terabyte memory which is to be used in a word addressable computer which is having a word size of 32 bits, then that means the number of words will become, the word size will be 32 bits, and the number of words will be 1 tera divided by 32, right? That will give me the number of words that is to be stored in the memory, right? Okay. Then the unit of transfer. Unit of transfer actually means the rate at which the data is transferred to or from the memory. Now once again, we may have two types of units of transfer. One is the internal unit of transfer, which is usually governed by the width of the data bus, right? If I have a 8-bit data bus, that means I can transfer 8 bits of data at one time. If I have a 16-bit data bus, I can transfer 16 bits of data at one time. You remember my famous Rajma Chawal example, right? So external, usually a block. This is the unit of transfer which is used for transfer between the CPU and an external memory device. If I'm, let us say, if I'm using a, tape device, a magnetic tape, the external unit of transfer can be a record. If I'm using a hard disk, it may be a cluster or it may be a sector. Then the third and important point is addressable unit. An addressable unit is the smallest unit of data that can be addressed. Let me specify. The computer may be word addressable, okay? But if I am saying I have a 1 terabyte of memory, if I say my computer is a word addressable computer, it means that although my computer will handle the data in terms of words, but the smallest addressable unit in my computer will still be the byte, right? Or the, if I talk about the memory end, if I talk about the computer's end, then the addressable unit will obviously be the word. Why? Because your computer is accessing the data in terms of words. Then there are access methods. On the basis of access methods, we may have 4 types of memories. We have sequential memories. Sequential memories in the sense that, as let us take the example, when I take the roll call, I start with the roll number 1 and go up to the last roll number. So similarly, in a sequential memory, the reading or writing of the memory will start at the first location and it will proceed in a sequential manner to the last location. Good example is the magnetic tape. If you remember, I don't know how many of you would have used it, the audio cassettes of the yesteryears. In case of an audio cassette, when you play an audio cassette, you have to go through song number 1, then song number 2, then song number 3, and so on. Even if you are pressing fast forward or reverse button, what you are actually doing is you are moving the tape in front of the head, but at a high rate. But so that is essentially a sequential device. Another important point being, in case of sequential devices, let us say you are at song number 1 and you want to go to, let us say, let's not take the example of song, let us say you are at data element number 1 and you want to go to data element number 3. It will take some amount of time. And now let us say you are again at data element number 1 and you want to go to data element number, let us say 100. Now the time taken in this case will be larger. So the access time depends on the location of data and the previous location, where you are and where you want to go. Next, we have the direct access devices. Now, in case of direct access devices, the storage or the memory is divided into individual blocks which have unique addresses, right? Then this we can say, let us take the example of a hard disk. If you know, the hard disk has a number of surfaces. Now all those surfaces are divided into tracks and sectors. Now while reading a particular device, a particular location, each and every surface of the hard disk has its own specific head. Now that head can be directly moved onto a particular track. But within that track, the individual sector or the individual piece of data has then to be sequentially accessed. So we say that access is by jumping to the vicinity plus sequential search. Once again, access time depends on the location and previous location. Then we have the random access. Random access means The best example obviously being the random access memory. Random access means the individual addresses are given individual addresses, locations are given individual addresses, and you can jump to any particular address immediately. What it means is the time that is taken to reach from one location to another location is independent of your current location and the location where you want to go. From going from location number 1 to 100 or 1 to 10,000, it will take exactly the same amount of time. There is yet another type of memory which is called associative memory, also called the content addressable memory. Now, content addressable memory, the data is located by comparison with the content of a portion of the storage. Here, the address is calculated on the basis of the contents of the memory. Right? We'll come to it later. This is a little bit complicated type of a memory. We'll come to it later on. The example being the cache memory. Right? When we'll talk about cache memory, then it will become much more clear. Then, memory hierarchy. As I said earlier, this is essentially a listing of all the memory devices and their comparative performances. This is how memory hierarchy is usually shown. Right? Now this, obviously this diagram is not very current, so you will not see your pen drives over here. But let's see over there. The basic idea of this memory hierarchy is, as you go up the hierarchy from the bottom to the top, as you go up the hierarchy, the size of the memory decreases, the speed of the memory increases, and the cost of the memory increases. We can say it also like that. As we go down the hierarchy, the size of the memory increases, the cost of the memory decreases, and the speed of the memory decreases. On the top, we have the registers, right? Registers which are present within the CPU. Then we have level 1 cache, level 2 cache. There are level 1, level 2 caches. The basic difference is the level 1 cache is present on the microprocessor chip itself. The level 2 cache is present on the motherboard. It is outside of the microprocessor chip, but it is present on the motherboard itself. There is another level 3 cache which can be attached as a separate card onto the motherboard. Then we have the main memory, which is the RAM and the ROM. Now these registers, cache memories and main memories, they are also called the system memories. Usually when we have a computer, the basic storage device or the main storage device of a computer is the hard disk or the fixed rigid disk. That is also said that is called the online storage. Then we have the optical disks. They are called the nearline disks. Then we may have the magnetic tape or the pen drives. They are called the offline devices, right? So this is the memory hierarchy. Let me once again repeat. As we go down the hierarchy, the size of the memory increases, the cost of the memory decreases. When I say cost, I am talking about cost per bit of storage. Cost of the memory decreases and the speed of the memory also decreases, or we can say the access time increases. Okay, now when we talk about the performance of a memory, we talk about the performance of the memory in terms of three basic parameters. One is the access time, that is the time that the memory takes between presenting the address and getting the valid data. If I'm reading the data from the memory or writing the data onto the memory, what I'm doing is I'll have to give an address, and that address will specify on which I want to write the data or from where I want to read the data. So that is the access time. Now this access time, before the data can be written onto or read from the memory, there is always a startup time or a recovery time. Say for example, if I take the example of hard disk, the hard disk has to attain a particular speed before the data can be transferred from the hard disk or data can be written onto the hard disk. So that time added to the access time gives me the memory cycle time. And obviously the reciprocal is the transfer rate. Transfer rate is basically 1 upon access time. So These are the three parameters on basis of which we measure the performance of a memory device. Then the physical types memory. We have semiconductor memory like RAM and ROM. We have magnetic memories like disk and tape. I have optical memories. I have other type of memories like flash memory, bubble memory, hologram memory. If you look at, if you Google it, you will find that there are nowadays protein memories are there, DNA memories are there. There are a lot of memory types are there, right? So these are the physical types of memories. Not going into much detail of these. Okay, so we'll leave the decay for the last. Let's start with the simplest one first, the power consumption. Different memory devices have a different level of power consumption, as should be clear. The CPU registers will obviously have the least amount of power consumption. Then your internal memories, RAM and ROM, will have slightly more power consumption, but not much. Then your USB drives will have a slightly more power consumption. Your hard disk will have even a slightly higher power consumption than your CD drives, and finally the magnetic tapes will have the maximum amount of power consumption, right? Erasability. On the basis of erasability, we may have two types of memories. One is the memories which are read-only memories, in the terms that once data has been written onto them, it cannot be erased, it cannot be changed. And then we have the read write memories, where we can read the data, we can erase the data from the memory, and we can put in fresh data. So we all know your ROM, read only memory, comes under the first category, wherein the data that is written on the ROM can only be read. You cannot write anything on the ROM, you cannot change the data, or you can erase the data that is already present on the ROM. Then your RAM, your hard disk, your pen drive, your CD, they all come under the erasable memories, in the sense that I can change the data, I can erase the data from there. Then volatility. What volatility means? It is the capability of a memory to hold on to the data in the absence of power. Now we all know that RAM has this characteristic that whatever data is stored on the RAM, that data is lost as soon as the power is turned off. That property is called volatility. Now RAM is the memory which is volatile. ROM or your CD or your pen drive or your hard disk, they are all non-volatile devices. Finally, let's come on to decay. Now decay has to do something with the way RAMs are created, RAMs are manufactured. There are two ways in which RAMs are manufactured. You must have heard about static RAM and dynamic RAM. Now RAM, how does a RAM work? A RAM works by storing the data into individual memory cells. Now your random access memory has a number of cells, each of the cell holding a particular bit, one bit of data. Now that memory cell can be manufactured in two ways. It can either be made with the help of a capacitance, or it can be made with the help of a transistor. If it is made with the help of a capacitor, capacitors are inherently smaller as compared to transistors. Now if I manufacture a RAM cell with capacitor, that means I can fit in more number of capacitors into the same area as compared to transistors. Now the RAM that is created with the help of capacitors is called a dynamic RAM, whereas the RAM that is created with the help of transistors is called a static RAM. Now let's understand what the difference is basically. Why do we call it static and dynamic RAM, right? And what does decay actually mean over here? I'll repeat, as a capacitor is smaller as compared to a transistor, the RAM that is created with capacitors can have more storage area as compared to the RAM that is created with the help of transistor for the same physical size of the RAM chip. But we all know that capacitors have an inherent weakness or inherent property that they leak away their charge. The charge on the capacitor leaks away. So whatever data is stored on a RAM that is created with the help of capacitors, as soon as you put the data in the capacitor, the charge starts leaking out of the capacitor. So if I leave it as it is, then after a specific point in time, whatever data was stored, see how a data is stored, it is stored in terms of ones and zeros. 0 will have a specific voltage level, 1 will have another specific voltage level. So if I store some data in a capacitor, due to the leakage of charge, there will come a time, after some specific time, some seconds or milliseconds, the data will be lost. So what should we do? In case of RAM that is created with the help of capacitors or the dynamic RAMs, we put in a refresh mechanism. What the refresh mechanism does, the refresh mechanism writes the same data onto the RAM again and again and again. You must have heard, you must have seen the specification for RAM, this many gigabytes or this many megabytes, and then 50 hertz or 60 hertz or something like that. Now this 50 or 60 hertz you see with RAM is the refresh rate. So this refresh mechanism writes the same data on the RAM again and again, so as to counter the effect of the charge leakage, right? Now semiconductor memories can be of many types. You can have RAM, you have ROM. Again, ROM also have a number of types: ROM, PROM, EPROM, EEPROM, and flash memory. Right? Let's talk about these. RAM. See, RAM, as we say, random access memory, this is actually a misnomer, in the sense that even ROM is a RAM. What I mean by that is, ROM, the read-only memory, is also random access by nature. See, random access means you can access any location in the memory in the same amount of time. So even the read-only memory is a random access memory. So earlier, in the very early stages, the read-only memory was created as a sequential memory. So from there the name has stuck. But it is a read-write memory. It is a volatile memory. That's why it is a temporary storage, and it can be static or dynamic, as we have discussed in the previous case. Read-only memory, it is a permanent storage. It is non-volatile, right? It is normally used to store library routines or system programs. Now, ROM can be of many types. We normally say that when we go and purchase a ROM, when we take a ROM from where it is fabricated, the data is already burnt on the ROM. I'll repeat, we say that when we take from the ROM from its manufacturer or from wherever the ROM is created or fabricated, the data is already burnt onto the ROM. So if I say read-only memory, it means the data is already burnt on the ROM. You can only read from the ROM. You cannot write, you cannot change the data that is present on the ROM. Now there are many types of ROMs. We have the simple ROM that is written during the manufacture. Then we have the PROM, programmable read-only memory. Now this programmable read-only memory means when the ROM is manufactured, it is manufactured in a blank state. We use a device that is called the PROM programmer. By using the PROM programmer, I can write the data on the PROM. Once I have written the data on the PROM, it now becomes a ROM. That means I can only write the data once on the PROM, and after that it becomes a read-only memory. You cannot erase the data from the PROM. Then I have the EPROM, the erasable programmable read-only memory, from where I can write the data, I can erase the data, I can rewrite the data. But here the erasure can be done with the help of ultraviolet rays or ultraviolet light. Then we have the electrically erasable ROM, which uses electrical signals to erase the data, but electrically erasable ROM normally takes much more time as compared to the EPROM. Then we have the flash memory, also called the EAROM, electrically alterable read-only memory, right? So these EEPROM and EAROM can be erased with the help of electricity, whereas EPROM uses ultraviolet light in order to erase the data. So these are the various types of ROMs, right? Okay. Now When we talk about memory, memory can be pictured or memory can be visualized as a big array, right? So this array or this locations, this series of locations can be thought of as the memory. Now each memory location has an address attached to it. Any memory location, any and all memory locations has an address that is associated with it, right? The address serves as the index of the array, and each address refers to one word of data. If you have worked with pointers in C or C++, you have already used or you know what the address is, how to refer to a particular address, how to use the address by in programmatically, right? You can read or write the data at any given memory address by using the specific address, right? Now, this is a basic block diagram of a RAM. This RAM has certain lines in it. Lines means input or output lines. We have the address lines, we have the chip select line, we have the write line, and we have the data lines. Now, let's go through them one by one. This memory that I am talking about, this is a 2 to the power m into n memory. As I said earlier, when we specify the capacity of a memory, we use two terms. One is the number of words and one is the word size. 2 to the power m is the number of words and n is the size of one word, right? Let's go through them. This chip select input, this essentially turns the memory chip on or off. When the chip select is 0, you cannot have any memory operation. This write signal, this actually works as both read and write signal. If it is 0, we take it as to be a read operation. If it is 1, we take it as a write operation. The address, the m bit address is placed on the address bus. We know that m bits in address, it can be used to address 2 to the power m locations, and the n bits of data travel on the data lines, right? So the WR selects between reading from or writing to the memory. To read the memory, WR should be set to 0. In case the WR is equal to 0, data lines will carry the n bit value stored at the address. That means the data will transfer from the memory to the CPU. To write, in case the WR is equal to 1, then it is a write operation. The data lines will carry the n bit value to save in the memory. We refer to it as 2 to the power m into n memory, as I said in the earlier slide also. 2 to the power m, if I have m number of address lines, it can be used to refer 2 to the power m locations. So this is the number of words and n is the size of one word. Say for example, I have a 2 to the power 24 into 16 RAM. That means 2 to the power 24 into 16 mega words, and each word is 16 bit. Now in this case, the data bit, the data bus will be 16 bit and the address bus will be 24 bits. Now when I want to perform a read operation from the RAM, how do we go through it? First of all, we enable the chip by ensuring CS is equal to 1. We select the read operation by setting WR is equal to 0. As I said earlier, WR performs the task of both a read signal as well as a write signal. When it is 0, we take it as a read signal. When it is 1, we take it as a write signal. So here I want to perform a read operation. So we put WR is equal to 0. Then it is a read operation. So we put the address on the address lines and the contents of that particular address will be placed on the data lines. If I want to perform a write operation, once again I have to turn the memory on by putting in CS is equal to 1. Then as it is a write operation, I have to put WR is equal to 1. Then I specify the address on the address lines, and whatever data is to be written onto the RAM, I put that data on the data lines, and that is stored on the location in the RAM. Now for the further discussions on RAM, Now next we will talk about how to expand the size of RAM. Now for the further discussions, I will make some changes to this basic block diagram of a RAM. Right? This will be the last slide today. I'll discuss it in detail in the next lecture. So now I am using a slightly different design of the RAM chip and the ROM chip. Right? Here what I am doing is I am using two chip selects. One is the chip select 1 and chip select 2. I am using separate read and write lines, and I am using the address lines, and the data lines are obviously there. Why am I doing it? For the simple purpose of simplicity, to enable to be able to explain to you how memory devices can be connected to each other. But all this in the next lecture. Stay tuned.